this RAM. This wiring, this is going to need some work. So we got to clean up all this, and unfortunately it looks about the same on the other side. What we're doing is there was one set of custom headlights put in with color changing, and now he's swapped to just switchback, which is what a lot of people do. They think they want the color changing, then they use it for about a month and they realize they never change colors, and so they just want switchback. You should just almost switchback to begin with. So these things are a big no-no. So don't do those, because you end up with this. And now I've got to patch or put heat shrink on all of these spots, which means I have to de-pin this wiring, pull these out, put heat shrink over them, and seal them up properly so that no more corrosion gets in there. Hopefully these haven't been on here too long, and we won't have too much of a problem. Let's have a look at one of these. So the way these work is, you can see this metal plate gets pushed in using the nylon clip, and it pierces this outer jacket. And so this little jaw right here pierces the protective coating on this copper wire and allows this metal to make contact with the metal inside there. Well, that's all good and well when you first do it. However, once it's been like that for a while, it turns out that copper oxidizes quite readily, and I don't know if this one we'll be able to see it or not. It's still kind of shiny in there, but yeah, okay, so this one's not bad. But I have seen plenty of these where that copper, water is gonna get in there. That's a given. When you pierce this stuff and you don't put anything like dielectric grease or whatever around it, water is gonna get in there, and it seeps this way because water likes to wick its way down stranded fibers like this, copper or fabric or whatever it is. Water's going to weep and wick its way into this wire both directions, and it's going to turn this stuff black. That makes it much harder for the copper to do its job of conducting the electrons and turning on the thing. So that is why you don't use this stuff. If you are hell-bent on using it, use some dielectric grease, and you'll prevent, or at least put off, this corrosion that is inevitably going to happen when you use these quick tap things. So this guy's lucky we caught it soon enough. We're going to seal these up with some marine grade heat shrink, and then I can get into the job of actually installing the headlights that he brought. This is, I'd stop the time lapse for a minute and just like three, not one or two, but three on the same damn wire. Like, why? And if you're thinking, well, gee, Brannen, why don't you just put some electrical tape around it instead of de-pinning them? Well, I'll tell you why. I'm glad you asked. Basically, if you put electrical tape around this, electrical tape is not waterproof. So what the tape is going to do, if you put, especially if you put just standard like vinyl electrical tape, if you just wrap it around this, that's going to let water in, and then it's going to trap that water there, and it's going to stay there, and it's going to make this problem much worse, much more quickly. So the correct solution to this, as far as I'm concerned, to fix on 3 wires, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nicks in the wire, is to get some marine grade heat shrink. Okay, so I've got my heat shrink cut here. If you're going to buy some, what you want to look for specifically is something with a, there we go. This is what you want. 3:1 is the shrink ratio. So it's going to go from this size to a third this size. It's going to be 3 times smaller in diameter once I hit it with the heat gun. So 3:1. It doesn't say it on here, but this is an adhesive lined heat shrink, you can kind of see it. Well, you can't really, but there's an adhesive inside this shrink that when you hit it with a heat gun, the adhesive will get activated and actually glue itself to whatever's inside here, helping to waterproof it. Okay, I got this one. This side's repaired. This looks much nicer. I'm going to get some cloth tape and tighten this up a little bit so it's nice and neat. If you depin these things, so something like this 2017 Ram, the pins have a clip on top and bottom. So if you look at the slow-mo earlier, you have to get a release tool on the top and the bottom pin to release it and let this thing slide out. A lot of pins only have one retaining clip, but these actually have two, top and bottom. And so you got to get both those released before you can slide the pin out. And once you go to slide it back in, make sure that it's all the way back in, so it's in just as far as the rest of the pins, so that it'll make good contact with the mating male counterparts on the component you're plugging it into. And then of course you just give them like a little tug, make sure everything's in there good and tight. So we'll do this, move on to the other side, and then we can actually get working on putting the headlights in. So on this one, not only did we use 3 T-taps like we did before on what I believe is the turn signal wire. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is. We also went in there, and by we I mean whoever had this before me. Obviously I wouldn't do this. Let's just strip back some insulation and wrap this wire around it. We don't need to bother with solder or anything like that. We'll just wrap some wire around some wire, put it in that electrical tape that, as I mentioned before, will just trap moisture in there and make things worse. And so now you've got, 3/16 of bare copper exposed to the elements. And you've gone from a tiny little nick in the sheathing protecting the copper wire to a very large opening in the copper wire, which is almost certain to cause you problems down the road. So let's fix that. We're going to do exactly that. Let's do that. There we go. Okay. Now, as before, I just got to depin this one, and where did you go? Yeah, there it is. Yeah, this green and white wire, which, mother of God, again, 1, 2, 3 broken spots in this wire. That is bad juju. So one thing, I don't know if you noticed in that last little clip there, let's see if I can zoom in enough to show this. One thing that's important on these, you see these 2 tangs sticking out. Those are what actually hold, these 2 little tangs are what actually hold the connector into the body of the connector, whatever. So when you depin it, these things have to get pressed down flat so that this can slide out. Well, in order for it to click back in place when you put it back in, you have to take these and pry them back out. Now be very gentle when you're doing this, because if you do it too much or too many times, these things will break off and you have to replace them or find some means of keeping this thing in the connector. I keep these surgical scalpels around. They're really cheap and you can get them on Amazon. Because they're really sharp. You can slide them up under there and just gently bend those things back out. They only have to be out a few degrees. It doesn't take much because they're a pretty tight tolerance once they slide into the connector housing. But you can see I've got all 3 of those. This one is just a touch more. And you can see that purple there. You can see it. That is excess plastic from, what that means is when I depinned this one, it took some of the, this tang wasn't fully pressed down. And so it took some of that plastic out with it. That's okay, it's not gonna hurt anything. But they're popped back out now, and so now I just gotta put these things back into place. Okay, so we've got this connector patched up. All the rest of the wires look like they're in good shape. I don't think they'll need that same level of attention. A little bit of nicks on them, but no exposed copper there. So this has been patched, the other side's been patched. So now we can actually get to putting in the headlights. So one thing I was doing just now is, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, dielectric grease. I use this Permatex brand, but on relay harnesses like this especially, one way to make these last a whole lot longer is to take all your connections and you grease up the female connections first. The female are the ones that get something plugged into them. The male ones are the ones that do the plugging in. Now that we've got that cleared up, same thing here, female cavities on the relays. This is an especially important one. Just fill every single cavity with exposed metal, including your fuse, your inline fuse. Pull that fuse out, put some grease in there. I've already done it on this one. All those little exposed electrical components, I know there's a seal there. Those don't always work all the time. So if you just do yourself a favor and add some dielectric grease to all these electrical connections, it's going to make this aftermarket stuff last way longer.